Crystal chandeliers hung over a room full of power when the moment shattered. Aaliyah, barefoot, shaking, clearly homeless, burst into the ballroom as a rich man lifted his spoon. Conversation stopped. Security grabbed her arms. Laughter rippled through silken suits. No one saw a child. They saw a problem. She screamed once, loud enough to cut through the room. "Don't eat that food!" Faces hardened. Evan ordered her dragged away. The crowd relaxed, confident they knew better than a child with nothing. The rich man paused, annoyed, embarrassed, certain this disruption meant nothing. They were wrong, because the real mistake wasn't the scream. It was believing the child didn't matter. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe if you believe stories like this should never be ignored. Before anyone in that ballroom noticed her, Aaliyah survived on routines that kept her invisible. She woke before the city did, washed up in public restrooms, and learned how to move through crowds without being seen. Hunger followed her, but it never owned her. What defined her was discipline. Quiet, stubborn, learned early. Aaliyah Brooks did not beg. She observed. She remembered. That came from her father. Marcus Brooks had spent his life in kitchens that demanded perfection. He taught her how heat changed food, how scent warned before danger appeared, how paying attention could save lives. He treated knowledge like armor, and he passed it on carefully, one lesson at a time. When Marcus Brooks died in what officials called an accident, the truth vanished with him. The case closed fast. Too fast. The system moved on. Aaliyah never did. The city felt different after that. Colder, sharper, rules applied unevenly. Authorities spoke confidently and listened selectively. People like Aaliyah learned where they were allowed to exist and where they were not. The streets taught her what power looked like when it wasn't questioned. Across town, the gala represented the opposite world. Charles Whitmore was known as a man of respect, philanthropy, and order. His name carried weight. People trusted what he stood for, without asking how that trust was maintained. Standing near him was Evan Whitmore, polished and assured, moving through the room like nothing could touch him. Behind the scenes, the kitchen ran with precision. Daniel Harper checked every detail, feeling pressure he couldn't explain. Something about the night felt off. Nearby, Lena Alvarez watched quietly, trained to notice what others ignored. She had learned that danger rarely announced itself, and above all of it, the system held steady, backed by people like Robert Caldwell, who understood how paperwork, silence, and timing could erase problems before they became visible. Aaliyah didn't know all their names yet. She only knew one thing for certain. The world that dismissed her had been built to protect itself, and when it was challenged, it would not stay quiet. The room did not calm after the scream. It tightened. Aaliyah stood frozen as hands closed in around her arms, not rough enough to look violent, but firm enough to remind her where she stood in the world. Faces turned away. Some stared with open irritation. Others smirked, entertained by the disruption as if it were part of the evening's program. The message was clear. This space was not built for someone like her. Evan stepped forward without hesitation, his confidence untouched. He did not look at Aaliyah as a child or a human being, only as an inconvenience that needed to be removed before it embarrassed the room further. "Get her out of here before she ruins the night," he said, his voice carrying easily across the tables. The crowd relaxed. Laughter returned in small, dismissive bursts. People trusted certainty more than truth, especially when it came from someone well-dressed and well-placed. Aaliyah felt the familiar weight settle in her chest. The feeling that came when speaking up only made things worse. She tried to pull free, not to run but to breathe. The smell still clung to her senses, sharper now, wrong in a way she could not ignore. Her father had taught her that danger did not always announce itself. Marcus Brooks used to say the body often knew before the mind was ready to accept it. The memory steadied her, even as humiliation pressed down harder. Evan leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound reasonable. "You don't belong here," he added, smiling, as if offering advice rather than delivering a verdict. Nearby, Daniel Harper watched the scene unfold with growing unease. He recognized the way Aaliyah's eyes kept returning to the bowl, the same focused urgency he had once seen in her father years earlier. He hesitated, knowing exactly what stepping in would cost him. Silence was safer. Silence was expected. Still, something in him refused to stay quiet. Her father trained her better than anyone I've ever worked with. Daniel Harper said, his words careful but firm. The response was immediate and cold. Charles Whitmore barely looked up from his seat, annoyance flickering across his face as attention drifted away from him. Power did not like being interrupted, especially by doubt. "This is not the time for theatrics," Charles Whitmore said, ending the discussion as far as he was concerned. The room followed his lead. Heads nodded, servers moved again. The moment threatened to pass, smothered by politeness and money. Aaliyah felt it slipping away. The truth, the chance, the only reason she had run inside at all. This was the moment she would be dismissed, escorted out, and forgotten. Another warning ignored. Another mistake sealed. From the edge of the room, Lena Alvarez watched quietly. She had been trained to read situations before they exploded, to notice the pauses people skipped over. She saw Evan's control, the crowd's relief, the way order was being restored without question. She also noticed the faint hesitation among the staff, the way Daniel's hands trembled, the way Aaliyah never once stopped watching the soup. "Protocol exists for a reason," Lena Alvarez said, her voice steady, measured, and promptly ignored. That dismissal told her everything she needed to know. The pressure increased. Evan's confidence sharpened into cruelty, emboldened by the room's compliance. He gestured again for Aaliyah to be removed, this time faster, harsher. The security team tightened their grip. The exit doors seemed suddenly very close. Aaliyah felt the weight of failure crash over her. This was the moment she lost. The moment the system proved it would protect itself no matter the cost. The room was already moving on, and somewhere above it all, unseen but deeply connected, the system that allowed this to happen remained intact. People like Robert Caldwell understood this kind of moment well. They knew how silence worked, how discomfort could be buried, how problems disappeared when the right people decided not to see them. Aaliyah's feet barely touched the floor as she was pulled forward. The smell grew stronger. Time felt thinner. The room believed the danger had passed. It hadn't. The worst part of injustice isn't the cruelty. It's the confidence that nothing will stop it. And as Aaliyah was dragged closer to the doors, the people responsible still believed they were in control. They were wrong. They just didn't know it yet. The moment stretched longer than it should have. Aaliyah was dragged toward the exit as the room slowly returned to itself. Conversations restarted in fragments. Glasses clinked. Chairs shifted. The wealthy believed the disruption had been handled, the problem neatly removed. Order, in their world, always reasserted itself. The rich man lifted his spoon again. Aaliyah twisted just enough to see the bowl one last time. The smell hit her fully now, metallic, bitter, unmistakably wrong. Her father's lessons rushed back all at once. Heat changed things. Some dangers only revealed themselves at the last second. This was one of them. Her voice broke free before the guards could stop it. If he eats that, he won't make it to the end of the night. The room froze. Evan Whitmore turned sharply, irritation flashing into anger. This wasn't part of the plan. He stepped forward, jaw tight, forcing a laugh that didn't land. "This is enough. She's lying. Take her out now." Security tightened their grip again, but something had shifted. The spoon hovered in the air. Charles Whitmore stared at the bowl, not convinced, but no longer relaxed. Doubt had slipped in, thin and dangerous. Daniel Harper moved before he fully realized what he was doing. He saw the way Aaliyah's eyes locked onto the soup, the same intensity he had once seen in Marcus Brooks during the worst kitchen emergencies. Training like that didn't come from nowhere. "She's reacting exactly the way her father used to," Daniel Harper said, voice strained. And he was never wrong. The room turned restless. Whispers spread faster now. Someone pushed back a chair. Another guest lowered their glass. Order cracked, just enough to let fear in. Lena Alvarez stepped forward, her focus sharp. She had already signaled her team. Protocol had been ignored once. She wouldn't let it happen again. "Stop service," Lena Alvarez said calmly. "Test the bowl." Evan Whitmore's confidence faltered. Just slightly. Enough to be noticed. The test happened fast. Too fast for excuses. Too fast for control to be regained. The color changed in the vial, subtle but undeniable. A hush fell over the room, heavier than the chandeliers above them. Someone gasped. Charles Whitmore stood slowly, the weight of the moment settling into his posture. His expression shifted from annoyance to something colder, Realization. The child he had nearly dismissed had just saved his life. The system he trusted had nearly killed him. Evan stepped back, eyes darting, calculating exits that no longer existed. His breathing changed. Sweat darkened his collar. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, words failing him for the first time that night. Aaliyah slipped from the guard's grasp as they loosened without being told to. She stood on her own now, small in the center of a room that suddenly felt much smaller itself. Lena moved closer, voice low but firm. "You're not leaving," she said, already signaling restraint. That was when the truth finished its climb to the surface. Daniel brought forward the journal that had never left Aaliyah's side, worn pages filled with her father's precise notes. Marcus Brooks hadn't just trained his daughter. He had documented everything: dates, ingredients, patterns, warnings, connections that linked the kitchen accident that killed him to the system that protected men like Evan Whitmore. Names surfaced where they weren't supposed to. Robert Caldwell's role became impossible to ignore. Paperwork delayed, reports mislabeled, inspections cleared without explanation. The same quiet machinery that erased Marcus Brooks had almost erased Aaliyah too. Evan's composure collapsed completely. His face drained as the room turned on him, not with sympathy, but with calculation. Power shifted audibly, chairs scraping back, phones rising, whispers sharpening into certainty. Charles Whitmore looked at Evan, then at Aaliyah. The truth was no longer abstract. It was standing in front of him, barefoot, breathing hard, undeniable. "You were protecting yourself," Charles Whitmore said, his voice tight. "Not this place." Security closed in. Evan didn't fight. Panic had already taken over, replacing the arrogance that carried him all night. The system he relied on had failed him in public, where silence could no longer save him. Aaliyah felt the weight lift, not relief, not victory, but something steadier. The moment she had been dragged toward the exit no longer defined her. The room saw her now, not as a problem, as proof. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone in that room knew it. Nothing could undo what had just been exposed, and nothing would ever be hidden the same way again. The night did not end with applause. It ended with consequences. Evan Whitmore was escorted out through the same doors he once controlled, his confidence gone, his name already unraveling in quiet calls and flashing screens. Charges followed quickly: attempted harm, obstruction, and conspiracy. Each one documented, signed, and impossible to walk back. The protection he relied on did not survive exposure. By morning, his influence was finished. The system that shielded him cracked next. Records surfaced. Delays were traced. Decisions once labeled procedural were reclassified as deliberate. Robert Caldwell lost the cover that paperwork had provided for years. Investigations widened, accounts were frozen, and the silence he engineered collapsed under scrutiny. There was no misunderstanding to hide behind this time. In the aftermath, Charles Whitmore stood before a truth he could no longer outsource. He ordered a full review, suspended leadership, and released findings publicly. The room he once trusted to function smoothly had nearly cost him his life. Authority without accountability had failed in front of everyone. For Aaliyah Brooks, validation came without celebration. Her warning was confirmed. Her voice was recorded, preserved, and believed. She was no longer described as a disruption, but as the reason people were still standing. The dignity she carried into that room finally met recognition that could not be taken back. Her father's name was restored. Marcus Brooks was no longer remembered as an accident, but as a man who documented truth when others chose comfort. His lessons about attention, discipline, and refusing to look away had outlived the systems that tried to bury them. Those who hesitated learned something too. Daniel Harper stepped into the light he once avoided. His choice to speak, now part of the official record. Lena Alvarez remained steady through the fallout, her instincts validated, her warnings no longer ignored. Nothing about the world changed overnight. Power did not disappear. Bias did not vanish, but something permanent shifted. A child society tried to force the truth into the open, not because the system worked, but because she refused to stay silent. So ask yourself this: how many warnings have we ignored because of who delivered them? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment, and subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more stories about truth, justice, and being seen.